This is the last chance before Purim, so I'm going to break a little bit with the Seder and talk a little bit about Purim and some ideas about Purim, about Amalek. And I'd like to begin with an amazing observation that was pointed out to me that I had never noticed before. We know that in the aftermath of the first Milchama of Amalek, it says, Vayishma Yisrael, Yisrael heard, and Yisrael came. And ultimately he converted. If you look in the Chumash, it says like this, it says Yisrael came. Rashi says, Mashmu Hashama. What did he hear? He heard about the Milchama of Amalek, he heard about the Piyas Yamsuf, and he came. And then it says, Vayisaper Moshe. Moshe told his father-in-law about all the things that had happened. And Yisrael says, Ato Yadati, now I know, Ki Godel Hashem Mikolu Elokim, that Hashem is the greatest. And it says, Vayichad Yisrael, he was very happy. Chazal say that means, Hever Cherev Chad al B'saro, he circumcised himself. Vayichad is Milashon Chad, something sharp, a sharp knife, circumcised himself. And he became a Jew. The question is, what did Moshe tell him that he didn't already know? It says that he heard about the Kriyas Yamsuf, he heard about the Milchama of Amalek. He comes, he doesn't convert right away. He has a conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, Vayisaper Moshe l'chos. Now Moshe told his father-in-law. And then Yisrael has this epiphany. After Yadati, now I know, Ki Godel Hashem Mikol Elokim, that God is the greatest, and he converts. What did Moshe add? What did Yisrael not know before that Moshe told him? So the Darchei is bothered by the question. And the Darchei says perhaps there were some details of the story that Yisrael didn't know. He only heard it from afar. So Moshe Rabbeinu supplemented. He filled in the last details, and that made all the difference. But it's hard to understand exactly what that means. What's interesting is that the Rabbeinu Bechaya, in his Perush, seems to make a big deal about this, not explicitly but implicitly. If you learn Rabbeinu Bechaya, you know that Rabbeinu Bechaya opens every week's parsha with a pasuk in Mishlei. He brings a pasuk in Mishlei and he elaborates on this pasuk, and that is a lead-in to the parsha. In Parshas Yisro, he says like this. He brings a pasuk which says, Marpei Lashon Eitz Chayim, that the healing of the tongue is a tree of life. The Pshuto Shel Mikra means if you heal the tongue requires healing. The tongue speaks Lashon Hara, speaks all sorts of terrible things. If you heal your tongue, that can be a tree of life. It can extend your life. In other words, in the Pshuto Shel Mikra, the tongue is the object which receives the healing. But Rabbeinu Bechaya learns the pasuk differently. Not that the tongue is the recipient of the healing, but the tongue is doing the healing. Marpei Lashon, the healing that the tongue performs is an Eitz Chayim. And he contrasts the healing which is effected through medicine, through herbs, to the healing which the tongue accomplishes. He says like this, he says, let's say a person is physically ill, and the doctor heals him, gives him medicine, gives him various treatments, herbs. So he says, it will not extend his life. It will only prevent his life from being shortened. As if a person is given a lifespan of 80 years, and now he has an illness which could cut his life short. So now he can be healed of his illness with the medicines, and he won't suffer a premature death. But he's not going to live longer than was decreed upon him. In other words, the refuahs, the healings that come from medicines, prevent a shortening of life, but they don't extend the life. But if a person, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, is a chola mechayli hanefesh, let's say there's an illness of his soul, and he receives healing through words, through teichacha, through rebuke. Someone speaks to him, gives him musar, inspires him, so then his life can actually be lengthened. And that's marpei lashon, that the healing of the tongue is Eitz Chayim. And he talks about this idea, how the tongue has a power to confer benefit on a person. He brings a Gemara, a famous Gemara. The Gemara says in Bava Basra that there was a Even Taiva, there was a beautiful jewel that was hung around the neck of Avram Avinu. Whoever would look at this jewel would be healed. And when Avram Avinu died, this jewel was hung begalgal chama. It was hung and suspended on the sun. Very perplexing Gemara what it means. Zbina Bechaya says that this Even Taiva, this jewel that was hanging on his neck, was the power of Avram Avinu's speech. Speech comes from your throat. In other words, his speech, his words, had a charm, had a power that they could heal people. They could heal people of the Chelei HaNefesh. And when he died, there was no one else that could do what he did. The only way a person could be inspired, as one was by the speech of Avram Avinu, is by reflecting on nature. It says in the Pasuk, Hashemayim Misapim Kvod Kel, the heavens speak the glory of God. So the healing which Avram Avinu was able to do with his words can only be achieved now by reflection upon nature. So that's the idea that Even Taiva is now suspended on the sun. Or the person could reflect on the patterns in the heavens, and he can come to the same level of healing. And he goes on and he talks about Avraham Avinu and all these wonderful things, and he says, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the same thing. That when Yisro came, Yisro was a chola mechelei hanefesh. He was a spiritually sick person, Yisro. And Moshe Rabbeinu had a conversation with him. And it says, Vayisapar Moshe l'chosno, Moshe spoke to his father-in-law, and he was able to heal him with his power of words, and as a result, he was misgayer, he became a Jew, and that's Rabbeinu Bechai's lead into the parsha. So it's an amazing thing that Rabbeinu Bechai is telling us that it wasn't what Yisro heard. What Yisro had heard from afar would not have done the trick. It was necessary for him to come to Moshe Rabbeinu and to have the healing words of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's Vayisapar Moshe l'chosno. This was Marpei Lashon Eitz Chaim, the healing of the tongue, and that was able to make all the difference, and accordingly Yisro converted, became a Jew, and achieved whatever he achieved. So it's clear that Bechai is pointing out this idea that somehow it isn't enough what Yisro knew before, that he heard about the Mechemes HaMalek, he heard about the Kriyas Yamsuf. It's somehow what Moshe Rabbeinu told him. Now you might wonder, by the way, one conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu, because we know that nowadays if a person is a chayla mechelei hanefesh, he has to go to the psychiatrist, and he may have to go to 100 sessions before he finds his way. But that's the difference. You know, as an expert like Moshe Rabbeinu, like one conversation, he can find the exact thing that you need to hear, and in one session, 15 minutes, you're healed. Nowadays, the psychiatrist can only roughly approach to what Moshe Rabbeinu could do in one session. But in any case, Rabbeinu Bechai clearly is making this point. So I was thinking about this, and it dawned on me that in reality, this is exactly what the Medrash Rabbah is saying in Parshas Yisro. And this is going to be a very, very important insight into the nature of Amalek and what Yisro achieved and what we're meant to achieve, because obviously we also have to grapple with Amalek. The famous Medrash, Vayishma Yisro, Hadahu Dechsiv, this is what it says in the Pasuk, Leit Taka Upesi Yarim, that if you beat a scoffer, the fool becomes wise, becomes clever. In other words, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu beat Amalek. Did Amalek learn a lesson? No. Because Amalek is called a leit, a scoffer. You can beat a scoffer, you can give musar to a scoffer, he doesn't change, doesn't learn anything. But the Pesi, the fool, who's a bystander, he becomes wise. And that's Yisro. In other words, whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu did to Amalek had no impact on Amalek, but it had impact on Yisro. V'cheinu Omer, and there's another pasuk which says, Ba'anosh leitz yech kam pesi. when you punish the late, the Pesi becomes wise, becomes a Chacham. Now it's very interesting, there are two very different verses. The first verse says, late taka, you beat the late, upesi yar, the fool becomes clever. The other verse says, ba'anosh late, when you punish the late, yech kam pesi, the pesi becomes wise. Now we're going to come back to this and see these two psukim are really saying two different things. But it says like this, it says, Amalek the Yisro hayu ba'etza im Paro, that Amalek and Yisro were advisors to Paro. Kishara Yisro she'i bein HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Amalek min ha'olam hazeh min ha'olam haba, when he saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed Amalek from this world and from the next world, so Toah, he wondered, v'asa tshuva, he did tshuva. And the Medrash goes on to bring an amazing thing, that when Bilam, years later, prophesied about the nations of the world, so when he talked about Amalek, he said, Reishis Goyim Amalek. Amalek was the first nation to oppose the Jewish people. V'achariso adei oved, and they are destined to be destroyed forever. In other words, because Amalek didn't repent. But when he looked upon Yisro's people, he said, Vayaras HaKeni, he saw the Keni. Yisro was from the Keni. And he said, Eisan Meishavecha, your dwelling place is very, very strong. V'sim Vasel Akinecha, and you placed your nest on the top of a tall rock. You know, if you're trying to escape from a grizzly bear, so where do you go? It says you sit in a very high rock. A grizzly bear can climb a tree, but he can't climb a rock. He can't dig his nails into it. So the safe place is on top of a rock. So, so the Medrash says, what is this comparable to? This is comparable to a hunter who was hunting birds. So he caught the first bird. So he wants to capture the second bird. So the bird went and sat on top of the king's statue. There's a statue of the king, and the second bird sits on the head of the king. So the hunter is wondering, what am I going to do? If I throw a rock, they'll arrest me for defacing the king's statue. I use a stick, maybe I'll hit the king's statue also. So I don't know what else to say, says the hunter. You escaped to a good place. In other words, the place you found is the place of safety. So Kach, Bilam saw that Amalek didn't repent, and therefore they're going to be destroyed. And Yisro, he saw, L'makam yafa barachta, right? You ran away to a good place. That's what it says in the pasuk. What does it mean? So, think about it for a second. You know, there was a famous philosopher, Pascal, and Pascal expressed an idea called Pascal's wager, which is this: so let's say you don't have proof either way. Does God exist? Does God not exist? It's prudent, it's wise to live your life as if God exists. Why? He says, because let's calculate the potential for a loss and gain. Let's say God does exist, and you act as if God doesn't exist. It could be a catastrophe. Yeah? The Rosh will punish you, you'll lose eternal bliss, you'll be punished in this world as well. But let's say God doesn't exist, and you live as if he does. So what loss will you suffer? A few pleasures, perhaps you'll have to forego. But all things considered, it's not so bad. So therefore, just for the sake of prudence, it makes sense to hedge your bets and act as if God exists. It says in the Medrash, that's what Yisro did. Yisro had a problem. He was teamed up with Amalek. Amalek and Yisro were both advisors to Paro. He sees what happened to Amalek, and he says, oh, maybe I'm next. So I have to escape. Where do I go? So I go to a safe place. Where's the safe place? I'll join the Jewish people. In other words, what the Medrash is saying is that when Yisro heard about the Mechamas Amalek and he came, this was not rooted in any deep religious conviction. It wasn't that he understood that Hashem hu Elokim and that this is the meaning of life and so on. In other words, he was engaging in Pascal's wager. He said, listen, I just have to protect myself. How did the Medrash know that? Because the Medrash was bothered by our very question. That if Yisro came to this understanding by virtue of what he had heard beforehand, so what did Moshe Rabbeinu add? So the Medrash says no, that when Yisro came, he did not come out of any deep conviction. Yisro came to save his neck. But after that conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu, he was enlightened. He said, now I truly understand. That's Marpe Lashon Eitz Chaim. That Moshe Rabbeinu was able to heal Yisro with his tongue. So now it wasn't simply that Yisro was finding refuge misafik. He didn't know how to save himself. Now Yisro understands the emes, and Ati Adati, V'yichad Yisro, and he's Mizgayer and becomes a Jew. But it was only because of this conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu. Yisro's initial coming was simply a very practical, pragmatic consideration. He wanted to save himself. He knew that Amalek was beaten. Maybe he's next. And therefore he has to do something to save himself. That's what he did. But what made the difference in terms of his own spiritual advancement is that conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu. So I think the Medrash is telling us exactly what Rabbeinu Bechaya says. Let's understand what's going on over here. It says in the Medrash that Amalek is called the Leitz. Amalek is called the Scoffer. And Yisro is called the Pesi. Because what is the idea of a Scoffer versus a Pesi? And in Mishlei, these two are often contrasted, the Leitz and the Pesi. The Leitz is a person for whom nothing has value. Nothing is meaningful, nothing is valuable, nothing is important. He's a nihilist. Everything is meant to be degraded and to be dismissed. And Rafutna says in the Maimer, that's why really Amalek, even in Yemos Mashiach, has no tikkun. It says, Achriso adei oved. This is like this. See, a person who recognizes that there is meaning, that there is value, just he has a mistaken idea of what the true meaning of life is, that person can be corrected. That person can be influenced. So he may have thought originally that the meaning of life is pleasure. Now he understands the meaning of life is dveikos and ribono shel olam, or whatever. But a person who rejects the very concept of meaning, that nothing has value, says you can't influence that person. You can't change that person. Therefore, even in Yemos Mashiach, where even the Umas Ha'olam come to their tikkun, but Amalek is Achriso adei oved. He has to be destroyed. Why is Amalek that late? So it could be that it's understood in light of something that the Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us. The Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us that Amalek believes in the idea of mikra. Asher karcha b'derech. Everything is mikra. Everything is chance. Now let's understand this. Let's talk about life. The challenge of Darwinism to religion was not that Darwin has a account of creation which varies from the Chumash. That's not the problem. The problem is this, that the confirmation of our belief in a creator traditionally has been the fact that the world appears to be a product of design. When you look in the world, everything works in harmony, everything functions, it's a system, everything interacts in perfect balance. So we think that design points to a designer. What Darwin was machadesh is that complexity can emerge from simplicity without a designer. In other words, through the process of random mutation and natural selection, complex organisms can emerge from simple organisms without a conscious designer. And it's not a directed process. It isn't a process which was meant to produce a sentient man. It was a process that could have gone in any direction, or in no direction for that matter, and it just happens to be that this is what happened. It's important to know this, because many people try to refute the theory of evolution, and they say that what is the likelihood of man emerging from an amoeba? What is the probability? So many intermediate steps would have taken place, and what is the probability of each of those steps? It's 1 in a trillion. So some people think that's a very, very powerful disproof of the theory of evolution. But what the evolutionists respond to that is that no, that you're making a mistake. You're assuming that this was a process whose purpose was to result in a man. If so, it's a very odd process, because the likelihood of that result coming out is very, very slim. It's not a directed process at all. Anything could have happened, and perhaps nothing could have happened. So it's true that the likelihood of any one person winning the lottery is 1 in a million. What's the likelihood of somebody winning the lottery? 100%. When you draw a ticket, someone's going to win. So it's true that evolution, the fact that it ended up this way is very, very unlikely. But it certainly would have ended up some way, and this is just the way it ended up. Now, if you believe in Mikra, if you believe a world in which there's no design, the first thing that flies out the window is the idea of meaning, of purpose. Because purpose is a function of design. The designer created the universe for a purpose, for a tachlis. But if there's no creator, there's no designer, then there is no tachlis, there is no purpose. And therefore, to the person who believes everything is mikra, he's the ultimate light, the ultimate scoffer. Because if there is no purpose, if there is no meaning, then what's the point? It's futile even to try to explore and discover what the purpose of life may be. How could there be purpose? If the world is not the function of design, if everything is mikra, then by definition there can't be a purpose. That's what a malach is. So a malach is the quintessential lights. Because he's the quintessential lights, there's nothing you can do. You can't inspire him, you can't instruct him. In other words, you can't lecture him on the meaning of life, because he rejects the very concept of meaning. Now, Yisro is the opposite. Yisro is the ultimate searcher for meaning. Now, he's the Pesi. And the Pasuk initially says that a Pesi is a fool, but we know in Mishlei there are many different words for fool. There's a Sachel, there's an Evil. A Pesi is a gullible fool. It says in the Pasuk, Pesi yamin b'chol davar, that a Pesi believes anything. Because he's open to everything. And Chazal say, or Tzadok points out, that in fact Yisro was Ayvid Kol Avodah Zarah Shabaylam. He worshipped every Avodah Zarah in the world. He was the ultimate seeker. He's going to try everything out. And therefore he's a Pesi. Now, the problem with the Pesi is like this, that we think that the Pesi, he searches, he's open to everything, he searches till he finds the truth. But that's not true. The Pesi can never stop searching. Because even if he finds something which may be true, how does he know? Maybe there's something which is truer or better beyond. Let's say you had a person who wanted to find the perfect wife scientifically. So how would you do that? You'd have to examine every possible candidate. So you meet this girl and that girl and the next girl and the fourth girl and so on and so forth. And finally you find someone who has potential. She's beautiful and she's very smart and she's very capable and so on and so forth. So could the person marry her? No. Because maybe the next person is even better than that. It's a very, very interesting thing. In other words, the Pesi, the person who's open to everything, who's a seeker in the sense he knows there's meaning, but he's trying to find what it is, can never stop his quest. And that's why Yisro, even after he hears of the Kriyas Yamsuf and the Mechemes HaMolek, the most he does is exercise caution. That, I better save my neck, just in case. Just in case, Hashem, hu look him, I better be on his good side. So I'm going to go and join Moshe Rabbeinu. But to say with a certainty that this is the meaning and this is the purpose of life, Yisro can't say that. Yisro still has to search. But what's the answer? Like, how do you solve this problem? The truth is this. The truth is that, let me give you a mashal that illustrates it. Let's say you're learning Gemara. And you know that a piece of Gemara lends itself to many different interpretations. So how do you figure out what the true pshat in the Gemara is? So some people would say, well, what you do is that you put down all the possible interpretations and you eliminate them one by one. The last one, which remains standing, that must be the true interpretation. But again, we have the same problem. Maybe there's another interpretation which I haven't yet thought of. But a person who has experience with Gemara, a person who's learned a lot of Gemara, develops an intuition, a sense that this is what the Gemara is saying. But he doesn't have to go through all the other possibilities. He feels in his bones, this is what the meaning of the words is. This is what the Chazal are getting at. And a person who is healthy, whose soul is healthy, has that intuition. When he experiences something which is right and it makes sense, he knows that it's emes. He feels that it's emes. He doesn't have to explore all the alternatives. It resonates in his own soul. But that's only if a person is healthy. If a person is a chola mecheli hanefesh, if the person is ill, then he can't trust that intuition. We know the famous Rambam. The Rambam says that chayli haguf, people who are physically sick, so when they taste foods, bitter tastes sweet, and sweet tastes bitter. Likewise, it says chayli hanefesh are the same thing. If a person is a chayli hanefesh, then things that are spiritually sweet taste bitter, and things that are spiritually bitter taste sweet. But that means a person who's chayli mecheli hanefesh can't rely on his intuition, can't rely on his taste, because his taste is corrupted. So you only can rely on his intellect. You rely on your intellect. If you want to analyze all the possibilities, there's no end. There are more possibilities than you could possibly analyze. That's Yisro. Yisro was a chayla mecheli hanefesh. So everything, I can't trust my intuition, I can't trust my judgment, I only can trust my reason. I trust my reason, there's no end to that. So he tried this, he tried this, he tried this, even after he heard the Melchamas Amalek, he said, okay, I better take precautions. But he didn't believe that this is necessarily 100% emes. Moshe Rabbeinu was merapahim, that's marpe losh neitz chayim. And when Yisro could finally rely on his intuition, because he was healed spiritually, then he said, Ati Adati, now I know, I don't have to explore more possibilities. Because I have this hergish, I have this feeling that this is correct, this is true. And I can rely on that, and he was Mizgayer, and of course his life changed accordingly. What Moshe Rabbeinu showed him, it seems, from Yisro's comment, was that there was design, there was a plan. What does the pasuk say? The Yisro, after he spoke to Moshe, Ati Adati, now I know ki godel Hashem mikol elokim, ki bodavar she'zodu olayim, because that which they conspired to do, that which Mitzrayim conspired to do, came upon them. So Rashi says that they decreed to drown the Jewish babies, and they were drowned in the Yamsuf. Now, to us, that connection is very obvious. Everybody reading the Chumash says, of course. They wanted to drown Jewish babies. Measure for measure, meter connected meter, they were drowned, very, very elegant. But, let's keep in mind something. How many years apart were these two episodes, the drowning of the Jewish babies and the Kriyas Yamsuf? How many years?
80 years.
80 years. Because the drowning of the Jewish babies when Moshe was born, the Kriyas Yamsuf was Moshe was 80. And how long was that Gezeirah in force, according to Chazal, the drowning of the babies? How long was it in force? Exactly 1 day. In other words, it was a Gezeirah that was made on the babies that would be born on a certain day, the day that was foreseen as the day that the Moshiach Shel Yisrael would be born. So imagine making a connection between two events, something that occurred 80 years ago on a single day, and so it was 80 years later, there's no connection. So when Moshe Rabbeinu explained this to Yisrael, Yisrael understood that there's a design, there's a plan. And once you understand that, then everything falls into place. And that's what Yisrael understood. The truth is, if you go back to that Medrash, and you see that's really the meaning of the two psukim in Mishlei. The first pasuk says, Leitz take upesi yarim. It says, if you beat a leitz, then the pesi becomes orum. Now, orum means to be wise, but we'll see what type of wisdom that is. And the other pasuk says, Ba'anosh leitz, when you punish the leitz, yech kam pesi, the pesi becomes a chacham. So there's two differences. And one pasuk says you beat the leitz take, the pesi becomes oru. When you punish the leitz, the pesi becomes a chacham. So the Malcolm explains in Mishlei very beautifully. Orum, throughout Mishlei, orum doesn't mean a person who has moral wisdom. Orum means a person who's wise in the sense that he knows what to do to protect himself. Right? It says in the pasuk that orum ra'a v'nistar, a person who's orum sees danger and he hides himself. Upsayim avru v'ne'enoshu, and fools, the pesi, he passes and he stumbles. Because the orum is the person who can protect himself. So leitz taka, if you beat the leitz, so Yisrael becomes smart. That's the first step of the process. Because he saw the defeat of Amalek, he didn't see it as an onesh. He didn't see it as a divine punishment. He didn't see it as a sign there's justice in the world. He just saw that Amalek was beat. He said, I better take my chances, or avoid taking my chances. Better protect myself. So therefore it says that Pesi Aram, he became Orum. He became wise in the sense that he knew what he had to do to save himself. But the next level is Ba'anos Leitz, when you give a punishment to the Leitz, meaning when it's clear that what the Leitz is suffering is not just that he was beaten, but there's a judgment, there's a law, there's a morality to it, then Yech Kam Pesi, the Pesi achieves moral wisdom. And those are the two steps. The Vayishma Yisro was the first half, Leit Takel Pesi Yarim. The Vayisapr Moshe is the second half of Ba'anosh Leit Yech Kam Pesi, that when he sees it as a punishment, there's a Mida Keneged Mida, there's a pattern, then he acquires moral wisdom, then Yisro becomes what he becomes. The refuah that Moshe Rabbeinu affected really is this. This is one that I want to leave with you, is the intuition, the gut feeling that we have, right, as opposed to trying to find truth solely through the process of the intellect, of reason. Because reason, most of us think the opposite. Most of us think that if we rely on our impulses, we're going to go astray. Because when we rely on our reason, then we're on solid footing. The reality is sometimes the opposite. Sometimes our intuition, our gut feeling, is more reliable than our reason. Marshall, in Shidduchim, so you see, sadly, there's an upsurge in the number of divorces in the religious community. So some people say, what's the cause of that? The cause of that is because young people, they rush into marriage, they don't know each other, and they make mistakes. They marry the wrong person and they're incompatible. The truth is, when you hear enough of the stories, right, you see that the exact opposite is true. So what happened was like this. So the couple meets, And let's say the girl, right off the bat, feels there's something that bothers me here. There's something which is wrong here. And her parents tell her, listen, you'll meet again, you'll work it out, and never, you know how hard it is nowadays for girls to find shidduchim, and so on and so forth. And they put pressures on them to go counter to their intuition. And then under pressure, they go into something which they had this intuition that it was not the right thing. They are convinced, they're persuaded, they're pressured, they go into it, and then their worst fears come true. It's the exact opposite. It's not that they follow their intuition and therefore didn't work out. The problem was that they didn't follow their intuition. they had intuition that something was wrong here, and their judgment told them to override their intuition, and that's why the problem happened. And you see this again and again and again. It's an amazing thing. I read an article. They did a study like this. There was someone who did a study of teachers, effective teachers, ineffective teachers. So they took video of teachers teaching in the classroom, and they decided they would show people little clips of the video without sound. And on that basis, they would judge. They would ask people to judge whether these are good teachers on 6 different criteria. So first they would give them a 15-second clip. Then they tried to do it with a 10-second clip, then with a 5-second clip. Ultimately, they would show the people 2 seconds of the person teaching and ask on the basis of a 2-second video clip without sound to evaluate the teacher on 6 different criteria. And they found that the evaluations almost perfectly matched the evaluations that students gave of the same teachers after a whole semester of having them as a teacher. Right? I mean, it's just incredible.
Was there a difference between the 15-second and the 2-second evaluations?
No. In other words, that the judgment you were able to make in 2 seconds. Immediately. And it was just, and almost perfectly matched the assessments that were made by students, university students, after a semester of having the teacher.
How did they pick those 2 seconds? Was it when the teacher had their hands around the throat of the kid?
I don't know. But the point is that there is an intuition that we have, right? And the problem is that we don't rely on it, right? Because we use our reason to go counter to our intuition. And that's what the pasuk really says on Kehalos. So Elokim also as Adam Yasher. Because the Baruch made a person straight. And they sought all sorts of cheshbonos. So what happens is that our intuition is good, right, when we follow it. But the problem is we second guess ourselves with our kayach of reason, and that's where we get messed up. And there's a very good reason why we do that. We do that because we feel we can't trust our intuition. Maybe there are times we can't trust it, because maybe there are times there's great stress, there are pressures, there's emotional turmoil, we panic. So therefore we figure that in those situations our only guide will be our reason. But we have to know that reason is notoriously unreliable. And we have to have a little more of a trust in that gut feeling that we have inside. And I think that's what the story of Yisro was telling us, that if Yisro, on the basis of reason, right, Yisro being open to everything, being very analytical, I'll try everything. I'm going to experiment, I'm going to try everything. Everybody's there in the world, right? That did not lead him to the Emes, right? It only led him at most to the necessity to take precautions to avoid being on God's side. But it was only when Moshe Rabbeinu healed him that he was able to trust that intuition. And the truth is this, I had an experience this past week. I spoke to a group of NCSY kids, and I was asked to do a question and answer session. So they told me to come at a certain time. They'll give me a list of questions. I can pick whichever questions I want to answer. I'll answer all of them. So, they gave me a stack of questions. I answered all the questions. Some of them were interesting. Some of them were funny. One of the questions was, what do I think of plastic surgery? Whatever, I had my opinion. I think of this, I think of that. What is it? Prove that God exists. Okay, took care of that. 2 minutes. Can't say he did a perfect job.
Was that connected to plastic surgery?
No, it is connected. But the point is that I was thinking about it, about proving that God exists. I mean, how many of us go through the process of examining all the alternatives? I mean, how many of us have practiced or studied Christianity, Buddhism, atheism, and so on and so forth. I mean, what's the basis of our conviction? And we weighed all the alternatives. If you're using reason, that's the only possible method you could use. You have to take all the possibilities and analyze each one. The idea is because we have a chush, we have a sense. A healthy neshama has a sense. This makes sense, this doesn't make sense. And we have to be trusting of that. And when we're trusting of that, then we can go on to do great things without second guessing ourselves. Right? When we stop trusting our intuition, so then we start using logic, and then there's no end. We can always maybe this, and maybe that. There's another type of fool. It's called the evil. And the Malbim says the evil is miloshen ulai. Ulai means perhaps. Right? The evil is a fool because whatever you propose, but maybe not, maybe the other way, maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. And when a person subjects everything to that type of questioning, then everything becomes a question. There's no serenity. There's no joy in life because everything is plagued with doubt. And that could be really the ultimate meaning behind Chayav Inish, the Desume Puraya. A person is obligated to become intoxicated. Ad lo yada ben oraham lebarach Mordechai. We have to understand that the rationality, right, is very important in the area of how to do something. If you want to know how to do something, so that type of practical reason is very, very good. If you want to know how to get to New York, then be sober. Right? A drunk person is probably not going to get there. A sober person will figure out whether to fly, whether to take the train, take the bus, drive, hitchhike, whatever. They'll be able to weigh the alternatives, etc. But in terms of our fundamental values, what is the true meaning of life, sometimes we have to just rely on that intuition, that which we know deep down in our hearts is true, is emes, and that will give us satisfaction and joy. And Purim is really that day. Purim is that day of the year where we beat Amalek, which is the quintessential lates, in our trying to find meaning in life. And this is what the Chazal were telling us, that if you're trying to beat Amalek, you're trying to beat the scoffer who says there is no meaning, and you're trying to find meaning, then the search for meaning is rooted in that intuition, not in the rational analysis of all the alternatives. So on that day, the day of Mechias Amalek, you can dispense with the rationality, and in the state of Ad Lo Yada, we all know the emes, we all know the truth. How do we implement it? That's for the rest of the year. That we do very soberly and very rationally. But in terms of the Mechias Amalek, that is Ad Lo Yada. And the truth is this. The truth is that it's an amazing thing. This is the difference between inventing something and discovering something. In other words, Columbus did not invent America. He discovered America. Thomas Edison did not discover the light bulb. He invented the light bulb. But the difference is that America was always there. Right? It's just that Columbus just stumbled on it. Right? The light bulb did not exist. Right? Edison invented it. It's pashut that you only can invent something if you tackle the problem rationally. But you only discover something inadvertently, right? In other words, if you think you know what you're going to, you won't realize what you stumbled across. Because Columbus, it's true, he discovered America, but he didn't know he discovered America. He never knew he discovered America. He thought he hit China. He hit India, right? Why? Because his intellect told him that he made a miscalculation. He calculated that Asia was 2,500 miles west of Spain, right? And he sailed 2,500 miles, and sure enough, he must have hit China. In other words, your rationality interferes. If you follow your intuition instead of second guessing yourself, then you may discover what is really in front of you. So to invent something, there you have to be rational and use your reason. But to discover something you just have to be open to it. And that's what hopefully Purim will be. It will be a day of discovery for all of us, of self-discovery. And then we'll be able to sober up after Purim and use our intellect to be able to implement that which we hopefully discovered